Tonight, Next presents The Race for Treasurer. No, don't change the channel. I swear, it is more exciting than it sounds.
Did you advocate for returning taxpayer bill of rights refunds to the most wealthy?
Can the voters count on you not to try and take that money away again?
This was the rip-roaring treasurer debate that we all expected.
But first, another election clerk gets a supervisor for this election because of past foul-ups. As the city advances a plan to develop one of the last big open spaces in Denver, there's a lawsuit against the developers involved. And a nonprofit in Colorado trains dogs to be the ears for people who are deaf or hard of hearing, specially training each dog for each person's needs. Your Word of Thanks microgiving will pair up more Coloradans with a life-changing dog. All that is next.
Another elections clerk is getting a babysitter to watch over their work this election season. The Republican clerk in Elbert County will be supervised by an elections official sent in by Democratic Secretary of State Jenna Griswold. Clerk Dallas Schroeder was the guy who gave copies of voting system hard drives to other people as they went hunting for election rigging. He straight up admitted to doing it. A judge made him retrieve the hard drives and hand them over. Schroeder had previously been assigned an election supervisor, Christy Coburn, the same person for the primary this year. During that cycle, a hand recount uncovered a box containing 37 uncounted ballots. Not good. We asked the Secretary of State's office, why are we sending in the same supervisor again? They told us that Coburn was not working with the Elbert County Clerk's office at the time that those ballots were received and misplaced. Secretary of State Griswold's office has also appointed an election supervisor for Democratic Pueblo County Clerk Bo Ortiz. That happened earlier this week. A string of mistakes out of that office in Pueblo County finally came to a head when Ortiz sent out the general election ballots with a tear-off tab at the top marked primary. 155 acres of open space does not just come along in Denver these days. It's a rare piece of property. So it's no surprise that the fight over what to do with the former Park Hill Golf Course has dragged on for years. Right now, at this hour, the city's Planning and Development Board is getting an earful from citizens at a hearing where the city is going to recommend that development on that property proceed. Developers have been working with Mayor Hancock's administration to come up with a formal plan. They're calling for housing units, a grocery store, and about 100 acres to remain open space. Big chunk of that, they say, is going to be a retention pond. Neighbors who are opposed to development successfully passed a ballot measure that's going to require fresh voter approval on any future development. It's clear the developers have already lost the trust of a nonprofit partner. They're now suing the developers over what's gone down at that property. Sisters of Color United for Education is a community health group. That nonprofit was renting the old clubhouse at the Park Hill Golf Course from the developers. In exchange for rent, the nonprofit paid to fix up the place. They hoped to make it a community center. That deal fell through. Sisters of Color says the developers wanted to make too many changes to the lease and demanded too much access to the space reserved for community. The nonprofit suing to get its money back.
They really wouldn't let us meet when we needed to meet or when community really needed the space. And so that was part of the issue as well, was that we actually weren't even allowed to use the space as we needed or wanted to. You know, I'm just surprised that, you know, they couldn't have more consideration for, you know, people that actually invested and put love into a space for community.
The nonprofit says the developers offered to settle the lawsuit. Sisters of Color rejected the deal. They said the developers wanted to count that settlement payment as a charitable donation. Hard of hearing and deaf Coloradans who had previously had their hearing earlier in life will tell you about how the world, with the loss of their hearing, becomes difficult to navigate. Scary, especially for women going out alone. It can be really discouraging and lonely. This week's Word of Thanks microgiving campaign supports International Hearing Dog, which is based right here in Adams County. They train service dogs to learn how to assist those Coloradans. This is intense, years-long training that begins when the dogs are puppies, often coming in from shelters. They're trained how to be a hearing dog, how to act as someone's ears at home, at work, at school, out and around in the community. And here's the best part. The dogs are specifically trained for each person's individual needs. They know which person is getting which dog, so the dogs can be trained for the specific sounds that person needs to be alerted to. Because the process is so personal, training one dog specifically for one person, it is time intensive and it's expensive. but the result is life-changing. These service dogs make the world easier to navigate, less dangerous, and less lonely. To get the link to donate, scan the QR code on your screen. If you have a Verizon phone, you can text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. The text function has been wonky for the other phone groups tonight, but anybody can use the QR code. Anybody can also find the link to give in the next section of 9news.com or on our Facebook or Twitter accounts. As always, I will never ask you to give if I don't do so myself, so I'll match the first 50 people who donate $5. Hearing Dog International, based right here in our community, helps Coloradans hold on to their independence and their confidence and maintain their connection with others. Our support for them is going to allow them to train more dogs for more of our neighbors.
These two men want to be in charge of Colorado's finances. They have a strong disagreement over how your taxpayer refunds were handled.
We wanted to be sure that people had that money in their pockets.
My opponent is running ads trying to get people to vote for him on the basis of giving them money that, in fact, they were going to get anyway.
Next presents The Race for Treasurer after this.
Colorado's state treasurer oversees the state's investments, has a hand in the state employees' retirement fund, and returns unclaimed property to Coloradans. But Democratic Treasurer Dave Young and Republican challenger Lang Sias also see the job as a crucial bully pulpit on financial issues more broadly. Today, as they debated here, they disagreed over how our taxpayer Bill of Rights refund should work.
Tabor, here we go. The taxpayer Bill of Rights, Tabor. Constitutional limit on how much the state can keep and spend in the part of the law that requires a vote of the people for any tax increase. So let's get the simple question out of the way. Mr. Sias, if you had your choice, without Tabor's requirements, should Coloradans always have a vote on tax increases?
Yes, they should.
Okay.
And on the refunds.
Mr. Young, should tax increases always be put to a vote regardless of Tabor?
Yes.
Okay. Now let's get into the weeds. Mr. Young, your first year as treasurer in 2019, you encouraged voters to pass Proposition CC to let the state keep all future Tabor refunds, including the ones we just partially got. Voters rejected that. This year, in response to the Tabor refunds getting sent to us earlier than normal, you have repeatedly said, quote, "This is a crucial time for us to get tax refunds back to taxpayers." Besides being politically advantageous in an election year, what got you to be pro-Tabor in 3 years?
Well, we know that the prices are going up, and so we wanted to be sure that people had that money in their pockets so that they could actually, and for people in moderate to low-income family situations, you know, they're struggling with rent, they're struggling with food, medicine, transportation, and the like. So, you know, we knew that it was important to get this back to people. I will remind you that CC was exactly what I just said. We put it in front of the voters, and they decided that they didn't want to support that. However, I will remind you it was for education funding and for transportation funding. And so I always talk about the outcomes of Tabor. And we've been watching Tabor now for 30 years. We have the lowest competitive salaries for teachers. You can't spend any time on the roads without seeing what the problems are. And I point back to Tabor as the problem that's causing that.
But if that's your position, shouldn't you be saying, I don't want to be giving you this $750, $1,500 check. I don't want to be giving it back to you.
No, not in a situation where we know the economy is turned. I think we should always look at the situations and make sure that we are addressing people's needs. But certainly education is a need, transportation is a need. I have a sister who's intellectually and developmentally disabled who was homeless for a year. And this I really attribute directly to Tabor. We've got people who are vulnerable and at risk, and we can't meet life-saving kinds of supports for them as a result of Tabor.
Thank you, Mr. Young. Mr. Sias, if you had your choice with Tabor, with the refunds, would you like to see them continue to be equitably distributed like they were this year, regardless of your income level, or do you want them to still increase as your income level increases?
My preference is that they reflect the taxes that people pay, but I frankly don't have much of an objection to the way they were distributed. My objection to this is, first of all, that my opponent is running ads trying to get people to vote for him on the basis of giving them money that, in fact, they were A, going to get anyway, and B, that he tried to prevent from ever happening. I also have a very different view about the government's about how the government should be able to reach into our family budgets and take money without our permission. I think getting that permission is important, and I do have a follow-up on his comment regarding education funding.
And just real quickly, if TABOR refunds continue to exist, should they be sent out early like they were this year?
I have no problem with them being sent out early.
A new state loan program was supposed to help small businesses through the pandemic. Did it do enough with your taxpayer money? And the candidates for treasurer make a final pitch for your vote.
That money is yours. You should be able to keep more of it.
The number one job of the treasurer is to protect the taxpayers' dollars.
Next presents The Race for Treasurer after this.
We return now to Next Presents, The Race for Treasurer. Democratic Treasurer Dave Young and Republican challenger Lang Sias discussing a state loan program that's spending millions of dollars trying to keep small businesses afloat.
And you mentioned the Climber program earlier in this debate. It's loans for small businesses. They have to be paid back, unlike federal PPP loans.
Right.
As of your May 2022 report, 9 companies borrowed $2 million and only 3 new jobs were created as a result. How is that a successful use of a loan program?
Well, that number has actually increased. We're at about 248 jobs saved. And frankly, it was the Trump-era PPP money that actually flooded the market. You know, no small business is going to take a loan, even if it's below market rate like we were offering. If they can actually get a forgivable loan, they don't even have to pay interest. They don't even have to pay the principal back as long as they follow the rules. And so we went back to the legislature. By the way, that bill, that was done by permission of the legislature. We had unanimous support of the state Senate, both very bipartisan, to run that program and stand it up. And then we discovered, because of the economic conditions that were changing, that the market forces had swayed away. So we went back to the legislature this last time. We did a deep dive with lenders, with small businesses, and actually retooled the program. We're about to stand that up again with better terms.
Mr. Sias, would you try to reform or end that program if you were treasurer?
I would take a very close look at it. I mean, the bottom line is that the current treasurer has been portraying that program as a success when, in fact, it cost the taxpayers a lot of money, over $11 million, to loan out to. That's not a good deal. And so the program has so far failed. And so I want to take a very close look at it and see if, in fact, it's the best use of the taxpayers' money going forward. I grew up in a small business, and I am all about helping small business. The question is whether using another $250 million of taxpayer money is best served in that fashion.
It's not $250 million of taxpayer dollars.
You have
It's a $250 million small business loan program, but actually 5 large contributing banks here in the state of Colorado agree that it's a good program and are actually putting in $200 million of their own capital in order to fund this program. So we have a lot of agreement on legislators and on bankers that this is a good program. We are retooling to try to make it work better.
Thank you both on that.
All right, this was the rip-roaring treasurer debate that we all expected. Each candidate will now make a 1-minute closing statement as determined by a coin toss. Mr. Sias, you can go first.
Well, thank you very much. You know, my wife Renee and I moved to Colorado 22 years ago because we wanted to raise our family and live and work in this great state. And we want that for our children as well as they grow older. But Colorado has become an incredibly expensive state under single-party rule. Right now, Colorado families are paying $11,000 a year more than they were at the beginning of 2021 just to maintain their standard of living. We need some balance, and I will restore that balance. And the choice in this race is pretty clear. My opponent, who I respect personally, thinks that the government should be able to take more of your hard-earned tax dollars from hardworking families so that the government can grow larger and spend it. I happen to believe that that money is yours, you should be able to keep more of it, and that the government should be more efficient and should actually be required to follow through on its promises. My name is Lang Sias. I'm asking for your vote. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Young.
Kyle and Marshall, thank you so much for organizing this. I want to thank the viewers that are watching. We've heard a lot of conversation about a variety of issues, but I want to remind the viewing public that the #1 job of the treasurer is to protect the taxpayers' dollars. And over the last 4 years, as I've led the Treasury, I've done a great job of doing that. Not one dime has been lost by the Treasury over the last 4 years, even through turbulent economic times. So I have a track record that proves that I can run the nuts and bolts of this office, and I'm very excited to do it. I've also been able to start a large and it's about to launch a retirement savings program called the Colorado Secure Savings Program that will actually allow people, 1 million people in the private sector, the opportunity to begin saving for retirement. Will save taxpayers $18 billion. So I am working very hard to protect taxpayers through the work that I do. As my opponent said, the ballots are in mail. If you haven't received it already, you may have. I am asking for your support and appreciate the time on the show.
You've been watching some of Next Presents The Race for Treasurer. The entire debate is streaming on 9 News Plus at 6:30, or you can watch it in its entirety on 9news.com or on the 9 News and Next YouTube channels. It's one in an unprecedented series of 6 debates that we are televising this year. Friday night on Next, the candidates for Colorado's 7th Congressional District, which includes Jeffco, will debate here. We're back with your feedback on these debates we're holding and our group project tonight, training service dogs for deaf Coloradans. Next. A nonprofit in Adams County specially trains hearing dogs for Coloradans who are deaf. It's a years-long process to make sure that each dog can alert its human to the sounds that person needs to know about so that they can navigate at home or work or school, so they can feel safe when they're out and around. We're raising money together this week to support International Hearing Dog. Our donations will help them train more dogs from life in a shelter to then life as a service dog. To get the link to donate, scan the QR code on your screen. Or if you have a Verizon phone, text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491. The text link is being wonky with the other phone providers tonight. So use that QR code or find the link to give on the next section of 9news.com or on our Facebook and Twitter accounts. Ron Miller writes in about our debate series. This is the kind of intelligent discourse we need in politics. We don't need the dog and pony show, Ron says. We need cogent debate on important topics. We agree, Ron, and I would say all credit goes to the candidates here and the willingness of 13 out of 14 campaigns in Colorado to come in and debate their ideas in front of you, the voters. These folks won't be able to hide when they're in office, so hiding before they get in office is a bad start. See you for Next tomorrow, and then another debate on Friday night. See you next time.